Okay, hello everyone, and I hope you're having a super mega large day. Phil Pendlebury here, and for any visitors from the Middle East, assalamu alaikum, mahaba. Good to have you with us, and if you're not watching live, well, I hope you're going to watch this a little bit later on. So today we're going to talk about mixing music in Dolby Atmos in Nuendo. It's a big subject, so my plan is to give you a little bit of background, just a little bit. We're going to then build a template, and then I'll show you how to save that, and we'll then use that template to actually mix some music. Now I'm struggling with music at the moment because all the tracks that I've got that I've been mixing are all actually now released and copyrighted. So if I used any of those, we would end up with no sound. So I've found some music that's not released, and we'll probably have to use that. In fact, we definitely will, because it's all prepared and ready. So anybody got any questions? I've got the chat open over here, as you can probably see. Feel free to chime in. So let's give you a little bit of background before we carry on. I'm going to just switch the camera over here, and you can see there is, yeah, we zoomed in. Okay, let's pull that down. So yeah, you might not know this, but it's good to give some info, even if you do already know these things. So Nuendo is the first DAW, or DAW, to have a fully integrated Atmos production available, and this is fully within the box. So you can literally go from start to finish within Nuendo. And of course, those of you that are interested in Cubase, you'll know that there's similar features coming to Cubase 12 soon as well. And of course the imminent arrival of Nuendo 12, which I can't talk about right now, but you'll be hearing about that soon. So Dolby Atmos, object-based audio. We've got the renderer here. I'm going to show you this when we start with the mix, and I'm going to obviously show you how it works in the when we start to build the template. But it's very clever. It will adapt to your setup. So the clever thing is that, all right, so if you're used to mixing, for instance, let's say in basic 5.1, which would be 5 channels of audio and 1 LFE or sub, you'll know that you have to place things in a particular place. So if you mix something towards the left front, for example, that's where it will go. You have to have that set up in order for it to translate. The clever thing with object-based and Atmos is that you don't have to have those exact speaker setups. The file itself is saved with metadata as opposed to individual channels. So that's one thing that's worth noting. Metadata is within the file rather than individual files, channels. Okay, so usually we have a bed, which would be 10 channels. That would be 9.1 or 7.1.2. If you're not sure what I mean by 7.1.2, we'll probably go into that later. But the 2 is usually a couple of ceiling speakers. So that's your bed, which basically the sound from the bed is sent straight to those speakers. We then have objects, which you can see would be populated underneath here, and you can have up to 128 altogether, which includes any number of beds as well. So you've got 128 objects altogether. You can add them and add items to them, pan them around the speaker array. So Nuendo includes the multi-panner, which is a spatial panner. And you'll see that again in a minute or two. That includes height in the panner. And the multi-panner is inserted in channels. And what happens next? Well, the audio gets routed to the Atmos renderer, which we have here. And it's included in Nuendo. So from there we can export and create an ADM, which is audio definition model file, which contains everything. That's audio, routing, panning, and all the other metadata. So this is what I was saying before. When we come to export at the end, the ADM file, it's not going to export a simple multi-channel file. Everything is in there so that you can import it and continue to work on it, including automation and everything. It's very, very clever. Nuendo itself supports first order, second order and third order ambisonics. Again, we haven't got time to go into what the difference between those is, but there's some nice videos around which I'll put links to tell you about that. Rendering itself is done directly from the project, from the ADM authoring tool, which I'll just give you a quick look at that while we're just talking. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. But again, no need to worry right now. I've just got that there for display at the moment because we're going to actually build the template in a minute. So the rendering's done from there, and it will produce a broadcast wave ADM. So that's that. So let's just talk quickly about beds and objects. Now this is a huge subject. And I've got about an hour here, so I'm going to have to kind of summarize. I've written some points that I thought you guys might find useful. If you want to get more information, there is a lot more out there. If I've tweaked your interest a little bit, that's great. Good afternoon, Sagi, by the way. I've seen you there. I can't really type right now because I'm, looking at the camera, although the camera's not on. All right. So beds are routed directly to certain speakers, as I mentioned earlier on. What's the difference between beds and objects? Beds routed directly to certain speakers. Objects are freely panable, and objects include metadata so that sound can be placed in the correct place regardless of your speaker setup. So we've already said that Atmos allows 128 channels. Usually 7.12 would be 10 of those, the beds, and then 118 objects, all more beds. And in this case, for me, it's usually going to be stereo. For music, it's usually going to be stereo tracks, and I'll tell you why when we get to the nitty-gritty in a minute. Typical uses for beds would be diffuse sounds that don't rely on precision placement. So possibly dialogue, reverb returns, although I don't actually use beds for my reverb returns, and I'll show you why when we start building the template. Ambiances and backgrounds, and objects are sounds that require more precise and dynamic placement. But there are no rules, and this whole thing is still evolving, bearing in mind that we're talking about let's put the camera on for a sec. You've been looking at a blank screen, haven't you there? Sorry, guys. Yeah. Thanks, Sagi. Nice to see you there. I've got a problem with this iPad. This iPad always lets me down when we're doing this. I can't get rid of the keyboard now. I've got a new stand for it, and I can't get rid of the keyboard. Anyway, we haven't got time. Where was I? Yeah, so we've got 3 basic segments today, and as you know, we're live streaming. I'm hoping you guys have got headphones, because you must be thinking, well, how do we monitor? How do we monitor? And what we're going to do is we're going to use the binaural down mix, which means that you can use headphones. And there's a few ways of doing this. It's built in to Nuendo, but also you can also select alternatives. So there's, for instance, there's the immerse, which is built in, and if you have a configuration for your own ears, you can select that. I can't show you that right now because we haven't got that set up in this project, but we will have in a minute. Dia VR also have a free plugin which enables you to switch over to that. It's very similar, sounds a little bit different. And also there's a very nice way of doing this using Waves NX so that you can actually take advantage of the head panning, which I sometimes use as well. So did I miss anything? Let's just see before we go on to actually create the template. I don't think I did. So what we'll do is we'll go back here and let's go ahead and make this template. Right, so let's set up the template that we're going to use, and we'll go through this step by step, and this is all quite important, so I thought I would start with a blank template here, and we'll go from the very top, as it were. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that the project's set to 48K, which we do here. We go up to Project Setup, and we're set at 48K. I'm at 24-bit. And the other thing is to be at 512 samples on your buffer size latency, which you'll do in various ways. For me, I have a separate control panel for the Fireface here, and set to 512 samples. And all that's required so that the renderer actually works. Now, there's two ways of doing this, and I'm having to do it slightly differently because we're sending the binaural headphone feed to you so that you can hear it here. And this is the actual bit that would be different if you were working on your own and not trying to send this to people. You'd go to your audio connections, and here where I've got the just main stereo out, not connected because I'm using control room, but that's where the stereo out is, you would add a third order ambisonics bus, and that's for monitoring, and we'll get to that in a minute. But we're not going to do that in the control room, as it were, or in the main outputs. What we're going to do is we're going to do it as an actual group. You can still call it a bus, but we're calling it groups here. So we'll add a group track, and the outputs will be to the main outs. The configuration will be third order ambisonics, and we'll give that a name. We'll just call it ambisonics bus. So there it is. You'll see it appear over here, and what I'm going to do is move it over to the other side at the bottom of the screen. So there's your third order ambisonics bus, and you'll see here that this has the VST AmbiDecoder set up, and that is what would appear in your control room here on the headphone section if you were setting this up, like I said earlier, to work on your own with an ambisonics actual output rather than it being a group bus. So we won't worry about that for now. We'll come back to that in a little while. So that's your main ambisonics bus, and that's so that we can monitor. So the next thing we need is the actual bus for the renderer. So again, we're going to add a group channel, and this time it will be 7.1.4. And this is going to be routed to the ambisonics bus, and we'll call that Atmos bus. And there's it's appeared over there again, so we'll move it across, and we'll just actually lift that up so that it's in the right place, so that it's all in the right order. And this is where we insert our renderer. So if we just type render here, we'll find renderer for Dolby Atmos, and there it is. So the Atmos bus is routed to the ambisonics where we are monitoring from, and actually we can also set that to main outs. So I'm going to keep the routing visible here. Right, close that down for now. So now, what we're on to now is a kind of, this is a lot of discussion about this. My way of working is I like to set up kind of a group for beds. So I don't want to have too many beds. So I'm going to set up a group 7.12, as we mentioned earlier. Beds are 7.12. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this. Oops, I just realized there's a spelling mistake there. We'll fix that. We'll fix that after. We're going to use this to send all the other things that we want to be in the beds, as it were, rather than having lots and lots of different bed tracks which take up space. I like to have just one, which I can then kind of use. It's a sum. It's a sum of all the different beds. So we'll call this let's see, bed sum. And that one is going to go to the Atmos bus. And we'll add that in. Once again, it's appeared over here, so let's move it across. And then we'll move it across there so it's in the right place. And I also will fix the spelling on that while we're at it. So there we've got the main thing set up. Now, additionally, there's a couple of quite interesting things here that we can do to make things a little bit easier on us, although it may seem complex to start off with. So what I like to do here is set up a group, or again, another bus, I suppose you would call it, for my 7.14 effects. And that will be routed to the Atmos bus as well. So, for example, we will go and we'll add another group track. And this is going to be 7.14. Of course, this depends if you happen to have any 7.1.4 compatible effects. So we'll call this, let's call it Compt Objects. And we'll get to why that is in a second. So, and this one is going to go to the Atmos bus. So we will make sure that's all. I'm just checking, double checking my spelling here. And once again, move it across and put it in the right place. So we're not actually going to put anything on that channel, the Compt Objects channel, but what you can then do is use that to route various other things. And this is going to be objects rather than a bed. And the reason for that is you can then move things around. You're not set with the whole concept of the bed, which are stuck in the speakers. Not only that, it's also full 7.1.4 rather than being 7.1.2, which, as we said earlier, is how the beds are. So that's that. Now the other thing is the low frequency, or the LFE send bus. We're going to set that up. So as you probably know, or maybe you don't, again, this is another big subject, and I want to get through making this template as quickly as I possibly can. So the low frequency signal's not included in the standard panner. So there's quite a few ways to get your LFE so that it's rendered. And here's how I like to do it. There's a few people around that have got different methods of doing this. But here's how I like to do it. So we're going to go to our studio setup here and have a look on the group and effects. Again, you can do this different ways. You can right click on the mixer to add these things, but it's just nice to be able to do it here on this screen where everything else is. What we're going to do here is we're going to go to add a child bus to the main bed, which is this bed sum here. So we're going to add a child bus and all child buses to bed sum. There we go. So you can see we've got all those buses there, which we can now pick from separately if we want to. You can also do that. You could do that in other ways, like I said, but this is the way that I like to work. So now we're going to add a mono group. So we add another group channel. Configuration will be mono. The audio outputs from this will be to, if I can find it, there it is. You can see the LFE of the bed sum. Yeah, there it is. And we'll call that LFE send. So now we've got an actual LFE channel. Let me put it in position, which we can then send when we start mixing. We can send things to that, and you'll then, get a little bit of the LFE signal going into your mix. That's almost it. The only other thing is now, obviously, we've created this Compt Objects bus here. Now this all needs to be routed, and we'll do that in a second. So the next thing I'm going to do is just very quickly create some more actual channels. So I've got another 7.14. That's going to be my plate reverb, which is a 7.14. Whoops. Yeah. And that one is going to go, that's going to be routed to comped objects. And you'll see again why that is in a second. So let's do that. Move it across. And then we can create another one, another group track, 7.14, going to comped objects. And this is going to be, you know, a standard 7.14 reverb. Push it across so it's with all the rest of the output stuff. Make sure it's routed the correct place, which we'll get to again. I'll push that up there. Yeah, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. All right, so comped object, and there's the comped objects bus, LFE send, bed sum, Atmos bus, ambisonics bus. Right, so the plate reverb and the reverb would be where I would insert my 7.14 compatible reverb and my 7.14 compatible plate. And finally, we can add, let's say, a quad group. Let's do that. A quad group, which we can use for one of the Steinberg reverbs, and we'll chuck that in a second. Quad reverb. And again, that's going to go across, put it in the right place, and make sure it's routed to comped objects, which it is. So, all right, so we've got that far. What I'll do is I'm going to load up my saved template in a minute, just to, you know, because we've got that is already kind of all sorted out. So what we need to do now is bring up the actual renderer. Here it is. Now you can see there's nothing on it at the moment. So we need to assign things. We're going to, first of all, assign the bed, which will be these first 10 channels, and then the bed object, which will be 12, I think. And we'll take it from there. And you'll see this starting to build up as we continue with the actual mix. The next thing, again, we'll try and zoom in on the menu over here. We need to go to Project, and we need to go to ADM Authoring for Dolby Atmos, and there it is. Now, I suggest you have this on a key command when you're doing this kind of mixing, because you need to refer back to it quite a lot, and sometimes if you accidentally close this box, you'll find that I'm having to search back again into the project menu and so on. So either have it on a key command, or try and remember just to minimize it, or in fact not even close it at all, just hide it from the screen, you know. So the first thing we need to do is select the renderer. So we're going to go to the internal renderer, which is the renderer for Dolby Atmos. And then the next thing would be to add the bed. So the main bed, our 7.12 bed, is going to be the bed sum. And we don't need to call that anything. We don't need to worry about it too much. We'll just call it bed sum. And that's going to be assigned, as you can see here, bed sum to the first 10. So that means that now, if I want to send anything to the bed, as it were, I can just route the channels directly to it. I don't need to keep creating more beds. So the next thing I'm going to do is add a group bed, as some people call it a group bed. For me, I'd like to call it a comped objects, or some people call it an object bed. And this is, again, so you've got a channel in order to send things to that you can freely play about with. As you know, with the beds, you're a little bit limited. You're a little bit limited with the panning and so on and so forth. Although you can change this to the multi-panner, which again we'll get to in a minute. Okay, so now we're going to add the comped objects objects here. First thing we need to do, we change this to the multi-panner. You can see, and we'll get into this, it's really excellent fun how this all works, but we'll get into that. There's the LFE, which we're going to get rid of because we've got our own send for that. We'll come back to that again in a bit. We've got the track selected. There's a couple of ways. You can either go to add objects, or you can create objects from selected tracks. And there it is, it's done for us. It's called it compt objects. It's routed to the correct place. And we haven't assigned this to a group, but I have done that on my actual template, which we'll use when we start the mix. So I think the only other thing just to mention before we go ahead and save this is, okay, so these are your buses to mix with, and you can add as many of these as you want. Experiment as well, by all means, you know, with the effect sends and so on and so forth. And you don't have to do it like I've done it. Obviously, I've got my compt objects, which is a group of objects. It means that you can move, you know, if you've got reverb being sent, you can move. You would never really want to touch this, to be honest. But it does mean that, let's say we've inserted our, let's quickly go here to a play. Let's say we've inserted our cinematic rooms 7.14 reverb, which is, you know, very nice. Actually, that would go there on the reverb, not on the plate. Don't forget to change to multi-panner. So now we could actually play around with that reverb as objects, sending each individual part of the panning to our compt objects bus. Okay, so before we move on, let's just create a dummy audio track, stereo, which doesn't matter about the input, so we'll make a stereo audio track, which will be the configuration of most of the tracks that I bring in to mix with. That needs routing to the Atmos bus over here, and we'll just call that dummy because there's nothing on it, it doesn't matter, we're not going to listen to it right now. So there it is. So in order to make that into an object, we need to bring back the renderer panel. And again, as I told you earlier, there's two ways. We can select the track and we can go functions, create objects, or we can do it this way, which add object, select the dummy. We can assign these to groups, so this would be music. Again, we'll get to the binaural settings in a minute, but basically that will mean if you set near, mid, far, or off, it will mean how the kind of perceived range of where that object's going to sit. So, okay, we've got the dummy object, and you can see that it's appeared over here. Now, the one thing that we'll see later on, I'll try and demo this a bit later on if we've still got time. You've got the beautiful multi-panner here, which enables you to move things front and back, and you can see it moving over here as well, and up and down. And you can do all sorts of clever things with that. Very nice. But one thing you'll find is with objects, you don't actually see the signal. So what we like to do here is we change the metering here, global meter settings. We'll change that to post panner. And again, I'll try and remember when we get to it to show you why that is a little bit later on. But post panner we set. And the other thing I like to do as well is to put my main outs and my ambisonics bus and my Atmos bus into solo defeat mode, so they never turn off, a bit like effects. And in fact, you normally have your effects in solo defeat mode as well. Right, so I think we're just about done with the actual setting up of the project. Like I said, I've got one I saved earlier with a few things slightly different. Some of the panners may be adjusted a little bit. And you can see here, incidentally, the way that the signal gets to the Atmos bus is by a send that is automatically created. So another nice thing is to double check And I like to do this. Some people don't care, but I like to have link panners on. If you're sending something, let's say we've got something on this track here, and we're sending it to our plate reverb. If we pan that object, the send to that plate reverb will also be panned. So you'll get that whole movement that, you know, instead of the send being central all the time. So if you've got a true stereo or a true 7.14 or 7.12 reverb, you know, you'll get a much better effect from that. Again, so much to talk about here, so we need to move on fast. So the final thing is, okay, so I've saved that. But how do we make it into a template? And that's quite simple, and it's really useful to know this. So we're going up to the menu and we're going to File, Save as Template. And all we do is we select or give it a new name, and I've got mine here, PAP Atmos, along with all my other kind of basic templates. So we'd select that, go to OK, and you now have a template which you can use. And I'm going to show you how we would get into, you know, the actual mix in a second. But that means you've now got a template that you can load up a new project with. Ah, yes, and there was one other thing I needed to do before we do move on. Again, you're going to see this all in action in a second, but we were just talking about the LFE send, so we would add that here as well. We would go to group and we'd go to the LFE send, and now anything that's coming in that channel will have a little bit of LFE sent to it as well. Usually very, very minimal. You don't want to overdo it with that. And we, you know, especially in the case of objects, you'll see that there's no LFE send at all. So now we have a way, for instance, if that was a bass in that group, in that dummy channel, we now have a way of sending, you know, just a little bit of signal to the LFE. Again, there's other ways of doing that, but this is, you know, this is the way we're going to do it today. Right, that's enough. Let's move on and actually import some tracks, use the template, and see if we can make some noise. Yeah, it's a big thing, isn't it? All this, and you know, I didn't really realize until we started here how long it was going to take to set up the actual template. I mean, that's, you know, but it is important. I've got it. I've got my kind of pre-prepared one loaded in here. So hopefully, let's just go back there so that you can see that. Nicholas, hi. I'm sorry I missed earlier on because my keyboard was covering up all the, you know, chat there, and I figured out how to get rid of it now. So yeah, so Nicholas said all groups are 7.14 except for the bed. Yeah, the bed is always 10, like I said earlier on. In most cases 7.1.2. The groups that I'm using, this is the comped objects thing. It's a bit of a trick, really. Because objects themselves can be single or stereo or quad or whatever you want. But the thing with the objects is you can move them around separately. It'll all make sense once we pull some audio in. Hopefully, anyway, hopefully. Yeah. So hopefully it'll make sense when we pull some audio in a second. So I had one other thing I wanted to just quickly point out again before we carry on, is that I am talking music here, right? So obviously this procedure probably is going to be different in bigger studios. If you happen to be able to build yourself a proper, you know, Ambisonics or Atmos setup, you know, that'd be marvelous. But most of what we're having to do is using some kind of emulation, you know, using headphones or whatever it might be. So, okay, but we're talking music, and this is how I like to work. So there's my template that's already finished, and what I'm going to do is also I will make sure that I have a link to this so that you can download it and adjust it and do whatever you want to do with it. It's very straightforward, even though it's taken a little while, you know, to set it all up. But once it's done, and I did consider actually just making the template, not talking about it, and then, you know, loading it up. But then I thought, no, you know, it'd be a good idea to go through the whole process. Right, so, okay, so now that I've got that template, I'm now going to close it. So we'll close the project, and you can see a blank screen there, and there is my desktop, which has 2 items on it, incidentally, and they're both work in process. I never have anything on my desktop, and hope you guys are in a similar state. So what I'm going to do is we're going to start a new project using the template that we built earlier on. So we're going to go to the hub and templates, and there is my let's zoom in. There is my Atmos template. You don't need the cameras on for that, do you? There's my Atmos template. So you can see I've got here checked prompt for project location. Now this applies to any template, not just Atmos, but I wanted to go through the whole process. And depending on how much time we have at the end will be how much of the actual mixing we do. Right, so we double click, or we can create. It's going to ask us for a folder. So I've already made a folder here called Mix. And we'll select that. That's a clever little utility I have called Listery, incidentally, which enables, you probably noticed that the file select box instantly switched over to the location that I had open in my file browser. So we've selected that folder, and you'll see now that the entire project template has loaded up, which is marvelous. So now the beauty of this is, as you can see here, the audio folder, all the things that you would normally expect from a template, from a project, have actually loaded themselves up. First thing I'm going to do is save it, and we're in the right place. So this is live stream mix without any spelling mistakes. And we're good to go. Right. So next step, we double check. We want to make sure, remember I was saying earlier about not closing the other window. So the authoring window. Let's just pull these down. I think we'll go back to full screen for this. So let's, yeah, and we'll remove the camera. So hopefully you can see what's going on here. This is the template as we saved it, but we're now in a brand new project, which we did by saving as template and using the template itself in a new location, which is awesome. Right, so the next step, mixing the music. Finally, we've got there after, what, 30 minutes or something. So again, there's a few schools of thought on this one. Some people say create the surround mix first, and some people say create your normal stereo mix first. To be honest, I'm kind of 50-50. No, I wouldn't say 50-50. I would say more 70-30 towards creating the stereo mix first. And there's a few little tricks that you can use when you do that, which we'll show you now. So I've got some stems that I said I've managed to export earlier on. This track is a work in progress. I'm just going to drag all those stems in, put them onto different tracks, pull them into the project, and you'll see them all there. And now you'll see, incidentally, as we look at the file browser, you'll see that they've all been imported into the correct place. So we don't need to look at that again. So here we are in our project with all these different tracks are now imported. And you can see I've got drums, basses, Foley, piano, guitar, orchestra, all sorts of things, and some vocals. And also I've actually exported the different effects that I used as a separate item. So if you played this right now, you would get the track exactly as I, had it mixed, apart from obviously bus compression and so on. That's going to be very loud, isn't it? I should just check the levels here, actually. Let's... but the thing is, rather than adding a lot of effects afterwards, which we will still do, it's also nice to have these because you can throw them around with the panner. So right, okay, it's no good just stopping there. We need to actually assign these to objects. So first thing I'm going to do is go to my routing here. I'm going to actually do this a quick way, which is to basically select all of those stereo stems that we've just brought in. I'm going to hit the quick link button here, and I'm going to route them to our Atmos bus. Still, we're not done. So now we will leave all those tracks connected, and we're going to go to the authoring tool, and we're going to create objects from selected tracks. And you'll see them all appearing over here. So if you look, you'll see them all appearing, which is great because we're live and it worked, which is always nice. The object groups really are just for your own, reference. I'm not actually 100% sure whether that would, the metadata would, the group itself. So I'll just quickly go through these and assign them anyway, seeing as we're doing things as we, as we would. And hey, it's live, I did say earlier you might need a cup of coffee for this one. So those are effects. I'm leaving everything on mid at the moment. Again, that's a whole other topic about near, far, and mid. But it's all to do with how it's placed in your kind of binaural monitoring setup. Produce, mix, fix, and conquer. Great name, and thanks ever so much. Yeah, great stuff. Right, so my final thing to do before we actually hear something is I've still got those channels all linked with Q-Link. So I'm going to pull the volumes down by quite a large amount. We'll take the Q-Link off and let's just play that and see if we're actually getting any noise. Yes, we are. And that looks a little bit quiet. A little bit quiet on my output, on my OBS output, but that was just to make sure that everything's not going to completely destroy my ears and indeed your system. So once again, quick Q-Link, let's just put something around there. So if I play this now, you basically should be able to hear roughly the mix as it was that I exported. We'll quickly go through it. It's only 2 minutes. It's the kind of end. There was a big track before this, and this is the end. Oops, left this. Okay, so this is the kind of rock section of the track with the solo. There's far too quiet. And the other thing I wanted to quickly do, we did talk about this earlier on, didn't we? I just wanted to make sure, yeah, you're aware of this. We need to zoom in for this. I'm sorry, I'm breaking off before we're getting started again. But this is the VST AmbiDecoder. So if you want to have a quick look. So that will give you your you know, your idea of as if you were moving your head around. The other thing is to use immerse with your own profile, which of course is no good to us right now because it's set up for me and it would not sound right for you. There's also, of course, speakers there and the Facebook setting, which again, far too much scope for this particular video. So let's get on with it. Let's talk about the actual mixing. What I think I'll do here is go through from the start. If I've missed anything, well, there's a couple of people on, maybe you could give us a quick shout if there's anything obvious that I've missed. But let's just go for it, and you know, I'll show you some of the ways that I like to do things. So starting off with the drums, let's have a listen. We'll set a loop. Let's just play. We'll just play it from over here somewhere. So as you can see at the moment, I think we need to zoom back out so that you can see everything. Yeah. As you can see at the moment, the drums, in fact, all of these tracks that we've just imported, they're all just coming up right at the front and center. And you'll see the object over here, sorry, here. And okay, so let's demonstrate what happens if we start using the panner. So that's front and back. So that's moving and you can see it over here as well. That's moving from the front to the rear. And again, this is perceived because we're using the AmbiDecoder. So you're not going to definitely be able to tell unless you really maybe close your eyes. Using the Waves NX, you can actually move your head around, and there are ways of doing it with a head tracker, but I don't have that set up, and I don't know many people that do. So we're having to, let's just put the drums back roughly where we think they should be. Another little trick which is handy is to save the basics as presets. So for example, I have object center, dead center, I've got beds saved as well, the positions, like the real basics, we're going to be front, back, and so on. And one other thing I need to point out very quickly is you will probably see if you're using Nuendo 11, you'll see this red light here on the renderer, which makes it look as though it's not connected, but it actually is. And if I can bring back, whoops, 1 second, yeah, where is it? There we are, the panel's disappeared. There is a way to get around that. You can either close your project and open it again, or what we can do is select no renderer here, and you'll see everything disappears. And we can just set it again, and everything will reappear. And you'll see there's actually no difference whatsoever, other than the fact that now, hopefully, yeah, the green light is on. And of course, the other thing there is to just ignore it completely, because it is a little buggette, I'm afraid. So it doesn't really matter. Right, back to the main screen, and let's have a little fiddle about with these drums. Yeah, so I've pulled the sends down. Now you can see that all these sends are sending to the Atmos renderer. And the reason that there is no sends here is because those are the two reverbs that are going to my comped objects bus, which we mentioned earlier on. So they don't get sent directly to the renderer. The LFE bus also doesn't get sent directly to the renderer because it's going to comped beds already. So back to drums and let's have a listen. Don't forget we've also got height here as well. To be a little careful with height, bearing in mind that all this is still evolving, you know. Watch out for the low ranges and watch out for high ranges. Really don't have a lot of distinction, shall we say. So remember, if an object is off the edge, it'll be split into different speakers. So again, it's always kind of nice, and you'll find a few people say this, is not to move things too far away from the edge, because otherwise when it translates to another system, it might not translate quite well, although it should because of the way that the whole thing works. Yeah, so usually we'll keep the drums and bass kind of front and center. So we'll do that. We'll put them kind of there. We'll leave them in the middle. You can see here as I raise and lower, you can see that the size of that object, let's just zoom in again. You can see that nice and clearly. So as I raise and lower, you see this here, these two bits here. That's the drums left and right. You can see that they're getting higher and bigger and smaller depending on where we have them. So I'm going to leave it right in the center. And let's just make some noise. So we've got reverence here, which I've set up in quad mode. You saw that earlier on in the template. This is the Steinberg reverb reverence, which works in quad, and we'll send a little bit of the drums to that. I've got it panned all the way to the outside and right in the middle again. So let's just send a little bit to reverence of the drums. And then the other thing we would do is we'll send to the LFE, because there isn't any. And you'll notice here on the LFE channel, as I start to push this in, you'll see, watch this. No, we've still got the comp to beds are still muted. There we are. You see, if I put too much of that in, it'll start to squash everything else out. So just want a little bit. Checking for questions. All right, well, cool. So yeah, I mean, this is basic. You know, it's an already kind of semi-mixed stereo set of drums. Let's just move through the mix quickly now, because we haven't got a lot of time left. So I'm going to pull in the bass. Incidentally, the different settings here, I think we can leave that for now. You know, you can just have a play around with them and you'll see what they do. I'm now getting very concerned that we are running out of time. Somebody else also asked about what do these letters mean here. Again, I will do that at the end, promise, right? I've got it written down, the question that was written earlier, so I will promise to do that at the end. So let's just get a basic mix built up and you'll see I'll stop when I get to some of the... So I'm just using that there to kind of have a little check and make sure that everything seems to be sounding okay where I've got it. Because like I said, we are listening in kind of, you know, pseudo ambisonics. For LFE group, do we need to filter out low pass? You know, Nicholas, I'm so glad you've said that. You see, this is me with rushing on. Now then, yeah, you know what? I thought I had done that, but yes, this is exactly what I do, and I don't know why I haven't done that there. So it's really good that you've mentioned that. We will indeed low pass filter, and in fact, I usually have quite a strong one on, and we'll take it usually down to kind of 100, 120. Otherwise, all the music that's coming from that channel will indeed, that goes to the LFE, will indeed have everything in it, which might not necessarily be a problem. So great question, Nicholas. Thanks for that. And isn't it amazing how, you know, and I remember in this template actually doing that. And what I must have done is just not saved it. But that's a great question. So that was the LFE send bus that we created earlier on, and I've got a low pass somewhere between 100 and 120. Yeah, let's usually leave it there, and what I'll do is I will remember before we save this all, before we finish, I need to save it all so that when you guys get it, that is already set as well. Right, let's carry on. So we're on the bass. Now, one thing I need to point out here is be careful with EQs, and this is why I think it's a good idea to do your actual normal stereo mix first, because you know exactly what things are going to sound like. EQs will change when you're listening in this kind of headphone binaural way, as I just demonstrated. If we play what we've got now, obviously the movement yaw is fine, but listen to this. So you could end up, you know, making adjustments to your EQ that really aren't necessary. Although I must admit, in this particular case, I'm definitely going to pull a bit of that raspy top end off the bass, just because, you know, this is the way it's ended up. And like I said, this track was never actually finished, so it's not a properly finished mix. Right, so there we are. And you can see them, the drums are spread there nicely. You've got the bass a little bit closer towards us. So what would be nice? Well, we don't really necessarily need to have a big, massive reverb on the drums, do we? Because they're already kind of done. But what I'd like to do here is show you one of the nice things about this whole setup. So we'll go to our reverence, and I'm going to make this a shorter. We don't need a church. I'm going to make this into a short. Stage. There we go. That's the kind of thing. Right, you can hear that. And then what we do is we'll open the panner for the quad reverb, and we'll pull it backwards a little bit, so that you're getting, you know, a little bit of dispersion. Put it down, maybe put it down on the floor just a little bit. Pull it backwards. Let's have a listen. Right. And don't forget that these are all going to this compt object bus. So, you know, oh no, in fact, no, the quad reverb isn't, is it? The quad reverb is its own. Yeah. Okay. So we'll carry on. What have we got next? PR Foley's is just effects, so we can do some silly things with the effects for sure. Yeah, let's we put those right at the back and up at the top. And we'll leave them at the outside for the moment. Okay. I can't, for the IP group doing it, I can see a little emoji there, Nicholas, but I can't actually tell what it is. Right, let's move on. Yeah, so there's the little bits of Foley. Let's move on to piano group. What have we got on pianos? Well, you haven't even heard this track in full yet, so I think what we do with the piano, we'll see what we've got. We've got right. So this is the first thing you probably noticed there, how dry those pianos and guitars sound, even though I've panned them around a little bit. And this is where what I was saying earlier about the exporting with the actual effects. So if I now play you just the effects from my stems. Do you see now we've got this ambience and effects that's already created for us because we did it all in the original stereo mix. And there's no need to worry about sends because they're all separate groups and we can do what we want with them. So let's go back, play the piano and guitar again. In fact, there's an acoustic there as well. Let's just have a listen to this. So you get the idea there. Again, I'm not going to go into super fine detail here, But because we've got those exported effects as part of the stems, and they're routed as objects, basically means we can play around with them. So if we've got the drum and the drum ambience already done, let's just thin these tracks out a little bit so you can see more clearly. Hang on, there we go. I won't go any more than that. So we play the drums, the bass, we've got the Foley done, we've got piano done, we've got guitars done. So it's kind of a built-in, already done. Everything's kind of ready for you to move around, rather than having to worry too much about your 7.14 plates and reverbs, although they are beautiful, So what else have we got here? We've got an acoustic. Let's just quickly listen to these. There's an acoustic part, I believe. We'll get to the guitar solo itself in a minute, because I want to do something a bit different with that, which I'll show you. Acoustic is at the end, yeah. I wonder if this track is actually making any sense to anyone at the moment, because I haven't actually played the whole thing, all the way through yet, and it is a bit strange. It was originally a piano piece with some lovely singing over it, and then there was a middle section which is the rock bit that you just heard, and then the theme comes crashing back in at the end, which is all orchestral. So rushing through, we now have the orchestral part, which is something I was quite excited to show you. I've split this up. Let's make a quick loop here. Oh, another thing I would normally have done as well would have been to map the tempo correctly, so that I've got, guides at the top and everything is in bars in case I needed to chop things up and so on. But I haven't done that now, so we'll just have a quick play. So we've got the orchestra's broken up into pieces. So pretty obvious with the orchestra there, split up into pieces. What I'm going to do is we're going to have one part at the front, one part at the back, lifted up maybe a little. In fact, I should have been lifting them all up. And then we'll have the solo strings we'll pull them in a little bit so they're not quite. And hopefully, the metadata sync thing will deal with that. Let's have a quick listen there. Whoops, one more time. Okay, so we've spread the orchestra out. You can see over here now, let's zoom in for a second. You can see that things are starting to, this is getting populated, and it gives you a view of what's going on. Right, let's have a play. What else have I got left? Apart from the guitar solo, I've got the actual vocal, which is my very rough guide vocal. And again, something I wanted to show you with the guide, with the vocals, so we can... There's a vocal group, which I'm not going to use, because that is exactly as the other things, that is a stereo bounce. But what we've got here, although they look stereo, these are actually the two double-tracked vocal parts, and they should be pretty dry. I've left the compression and a couple of the things, but so let's have a listen to those.
So now it's unreasonable this and impossible that. There's a problem to solve, and the world's in a trap.
Okay.
Wanting progress for all, and a fair share of wealth.
So again, because I've got two double-track vocals here, my thing here would be, well, I'm going to pull them in, and I'm actually going to, there it is, I'm going to rotate them and put one there. And then we'll move to the other one, if I can find it. Where is it? There it is, yeah. Oops, sorry, okay. So what we want to do, I'm sure you can imagine what's going to happen here. I'm going to pull that one in, similar, and going to rotate it the other way. It's not quite right. But you could save a preset here or write the numbers down so that it's accurate. Like that's 35, which isn't going to work. Whoops, hang on. There we go. Right, so let's have a quick listen there.
It's unreasonable this and impossible that. There's a problem to solve, and the world's in a trap. Wanting progress for all, and a fair share of wealth.
Not my best vocal. We should move those further into the center. And then what I'm going to do is send also some of that to the quad reverb that we had at the back. So let's have a quick listen to that.
So now it's unreasonable this and impossible that. There's a problem to solve, and the world's in a trap. Wanting progress for all, and a fair share of wealth. Our planet is fighting itself, fighting for health.
And one more thing, which would be kind of nice. We'll just put a little bit of delay. Where is my mono? I'll just use my mono, my Steinberg mono delay here. There it is. It'll do fine. One more time.
So now it's unreasonable this and impossible that. There's a problem to solve, and the world's in a trap. Wanting progress for all, and a fair share of wealth. Our planet is fighting itself, fighting for health.
So we've got two slightly different delays on the two vocals, which are panned into various places, and still we haven't heard the whole thing at once. So you can have a quick listen. Let's go through and balance everything. The one more thing we have to do is the guitar solo, which, as I said, I'm going to save until the end. So let's have a listen to that, see how we are.
So now it's unreasonable this and impossible that. There's a problem to solve, and the world's in a trap. Wanting progress for all, and a fair share of wealth. Our planet
Okay, so the levels are starting to get a bit over the top, and this is something else to bear in mind, wouldn't it? You know, is to watch out for your levels. We should be really aiming for about 18 LUFS here, and I'm way over that. But not to worry, because I've said it now, so you know. And wouldn't it be nice if there was some kind of indication of loudness level here? Watch this space. Right, so we're nearly done. I think it's sounding okay to me. And like I said, I don't want you all to sit here and, you know, just listen to my half a song over and over again. So I just want to quickly show you one more little thing, which would be with this, we'll find the guitar solo, which of course is the automation. So here's the solo. There's two. So what I'd like to do is, when this solo comes in, I'd like the guitar player to enter from the rear of the room, and from maybe, you know, we'll say from the top. So, and we'll pull the width in. But I don't want it to stay there because it's a solo. So what I want to do is give it a little bit of interest. I'm always very careful with my guitar solos. I try to do things that are memorable rather than just a lot of widdly diddly noise. Not that I don't like widdly diddly noise, because I do. But even so, a little bit of movement, especially when you've got that full Atmos setup, wouldn't do any harm. And anyway, it's a good idea. It's a good way to demonstrate how this works. So look, let's write some automation. First thing I'm going to do is bring the guitar player from the front, from the back of the room to the front. That was very noisy. And we'll also bring him from the top down to the bottom. So we'll do that as a separate pass. Okay, and I can just, if you can see that automation there, I can just get rid of that so that it ends up staying in that position. Actually, let's just move that whole thing. Excuse me. And while we're at it, we'll put that into a part. And just, you know, seeing as people are listening, we will get rid of the noise. Not that you could hear it underneath the track. So there we now have some moving guitar in the solo. And you can see it over here. And we do the same thing with the little part at the end. Sorry, I forgot to put it right on. One more time. Okay, So we can maybe just make him, now that I've got that automation point already drawn in, let's zoom in. So I know that this automation lane here was for the top and bottom pan. So rather than, you know, having to sit through it all, I can just draw that in. Whoops, hey, come on, why won't it let me draw that? Okay, and just gradually kind of pan him to the back of the room again. 3, 2, 1, yeah, back in the room. Okay. Sorry, to the top. This is top and bottom, yeah. Right, so let's have a listen to the whole thing before we conclude with a couple of observations and other little things. I think I've given you a decent-ish idea of how to approach this. But of course, everybody has their own ideas, but we'll have a listen to the whole thing and I'll just balance it up a little bit and then we'll show you what happens next. Okay, so yeah, we've got through quite a bit of ground there, I think. You know, really from start to finish. Like I said, the one thing that's a little bit of a letdown here is the actual track that I'm using, because it's not a finished track in the first place. But you know the routine with YouTube. Unfortunately, even though I've got my own music, it's all copyrighted on YouTube, and therefore if I play it live, it will just mute. So unless I just did, I think you can do 8 seconds, which is useless for this kind of thing. So I've had to find a work in progress, or a work that was in progress. We'll go back to the screen for a second. I'm going to just quickly, a couple of things to point out. So we need to zoom in, and I'll pull this over and answer the question I had from my good friend T, who said, what do all the speaker configurations mean under here? Not that you can read them that easily, but basically, yes. So we'll go from left to right. So we've got left here, L for left, R for right, C for center, which is the speaker that's usually kind of underneath your TV or behind the movie screen or whatever. LFE, which would be the low frequency emitter, I think. I'm not quite sure. That always made sense to me. LFE, which also would be sometimes sent to your subwoofer. LS and RS excuse me, I had a frog in my throat. LS and RS, left and right surround. So that's left, right, surround. Then you've got SL and SR, which are left and right rear. So the R is for rear. So it's rear surround. So it's surround left, surround right. Rear, and then we have TFL and TFR. Gosh, this is complex, isn't it? Left and right, top, front overhead speakers. So that's the front overheads, and then presumably the back ones are TRL and TRR are the left and right top rear overhead. All right, so we got that. So a couple of other things I wanted to point out. Let's just make sure I got all my little points in before we go to the actual final stage. I hope you understood my reasoning for using reverb, even though we didn't actually use it because they're cinematic rooms, and I wanted to kind of stick to Steinberg stuff today. But why we've used the reverb things as 7.14 send to this compt objects bus. It's, you know, it was just, it's really useful to be able to control those and you'll find that later on maybe if you start doing it yourself. The binaural thing, I think we already discussed that. Off, near, mid, far, average. It can set objects near or far for different depth. So maybe like the effects we would have set them far, but pretty much everything else would have either been near or mid when you're doing music. At least it would for me. I did mention about EQ, bearing in mind that, you know, the binaural process may influence how your EQ actually sounds. And don't get carried away with automation. I think that's really the key with all this. As you can see, it doesn't look super impressive. I mean, I think it's amazing, but it doesn't look super impressive. I've got most things stuck around the edges here, and when you're playing the music, you know, you see all the light.
It's unreasonable this and impossible that. There's a problem to solve.
You can see things lit up, and you can't see much movement like you do when if I was doing sound design for a movie or a game. You get things flying around all over the place. It's really impressive. But for music, yeah, a little bit, but you don't want to be going panning things in all sorts of strange places. Even that guitar solo probably was a little bit over the top. You heard it when it came in, how it, you know, the level, the perceived level was not quite how you would probably expect. So the final thing, what do we do when we've finished with that? And this is, again, the beauty of having Nuendo, is it's such a simple thing. If you distribute using somebody like DistroKid, thanks Sagi. Yeah, SL and SR are sides. Yeah. SL and SR, left and right, rear I've got here. Yeah, okay, yeah, I got you. Sides, thank you for that. I knew that there'd be something I'd get pulled up on today. And I should have just done that from memory rather than written it down. Thanks for that, guys. Very, very much appreciated. It's really appreciated. Any little things, there's bound to be loads of little things. There will be some things that are not mistakes, that are just ways of doing things, and there's probably going to be a couple of errors, like my little spelling error earlier on as well. But hey, you know, we've got to the stage now where we're ready to export, and this is how it's done. Very simple. Oh, how do we do this? I wonder. Okay, well, first thing we do is we get rid of the camera. We pull up the ADM authoring tool and we go export ADM file. And that's it. You now select wherever you want to put that. And we will export the whole thing. That can then be sent to DistroKid. There's other ways of treating that afterwards. You could pull it back in as well. You can see all the automation. We are definitely out of time now. In fact, I'm 30, 40 minutes over. So I hope it was interesting enough to keep a few of you people around. But exporting the ADM file, so there's no need for any external tools unless you possibly wanted to convert your ADM to something else. But if you export that ADM file and you find somebody who you really love as a mixer or producer, you send them that ADM file. If they imported it into Nuendo, all this automation, all the movement, everything that I've just done, apart from obviously if you haven't got the same plugins, everything would appear and move around and do what it's supposed to do, because all the metadata is in that ADM file, which is just superb. It's going to be difficult to judge your mix perfectly using headphones, obviously, but we can't sadly all afford you know, a full Atmos or Ambisonic or whatever you want. You know, we can't all afford that right now, and we haven't got space for it. So that's that one. I think there was one more thing I wanted to mention. I can't remember what it is. Yeah, watch out for the feature coming up on... Oh, yes, right, I've got it. So the only thing we're missing, right, so you finish a normal mix and then you do some mastering and you do some bus compression and all that. And you're probably thinking, well, yeah, because it does, doesn't it? It does sound a little bit unpolished because there's none of that kind of thing that's tying it all together. And there's a few ways of doing that. I'm going to look at that in another video, but there is a plugin available which basically will insert itself. You insert it onto all the channels and they all look at each other at the same time. And you can, for instance, pull the compression ratio down and it will compress that track, but also it'll be listening to all the other tracks. So it can be done in other ways, but there's a specific plugin that's been released that a few people use called Hornet Samp. So you might want to check that out. But I think what we'll do is for the next video, we'll go into those kind of a little bit more details. If possible. So I'm going to play out the track one more time. I've got to say thanks. I'm just going to have a quick look. Thank you once again for the correction, SL, of course, and it's obvious, isn't it? Also, Nicholas says Jimi Hendrix, Eddie Kramer would have a field day with panning in this format. Yeah, I know. Yeah, imagine that if that was all done in you know, if this was available back in the 70s. And the track is sick. Thank you. I mean, this is all my own work. My friend has writes some lyrics and he sends me lyrics and I just write whatever I feel like. And yeah, my musical influences are obviously all from 70s, 80s. Everything you're hearing there I do. I don't have any session friends, musicians or anything like that. So it's all me. But the nice thing with this friend of mine, Carl, who sends me these lyrics is he just lets me do whatever I want. He's not really picky. He sometimes sends some instructions. And this was one track that never really got finished, and you can see why, because we're not sure where it really wanted to go. So I'm going to play out with this, and only remains for me to say thank you ever so much for watching. I've really enjoyed this. I know it was a little bit of a learning curve, especially trying to do it live. But hey, I mean, I know there's a number of Dolby Atmos tutorials and videos around, but I don't think many of them would be live. It's certainly a challenge and a task, but we managed. Thanks to you guys as well for your help. We'll see you next time. I'm going to play out with the track, and don't forget I will be putting the links to download the template over the next couple of days. I'll get that done probably tomorrow, and hopefully see you sometime early next month, where hopefully we'll have something new to look at. Thanks very much indeed. Like and subscribe if you fancy it. That's up to you. It would always be appreciated. See you soon. Thanks. Super mega large. Let's have a listen. Nicholas, I will definitely post the template without any audio, so it's ready for you to. All you have to do is do the import, set the routing to the Atmos renderer, and import your objects, and it'll be all ready to go. And thanks, guys. Yeah, stick around for the next 30 seconds or so and listen to the play out. See you again.